everyone, and welcome to another tutorial. My name is Ryan Boyle, and today I'm going to walk you through a new plugin, or rather should I say an update to an old plugin, Newton 2. And if you've never used Newton before, it's basically a 2D physics simulator plugin for After Effects. And what it does is it will take all your different layers in After Effects and convert them into rigid bodies. Now this will let you basically add gravity, collisions, bounce, friction, all sorts of great physics simulations within After Effects itself. So this is just going to be a quick introduction to the different features in Newton 2. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and let's get started. Now, first off with this scene, you'll notice we're using a little ball and chain, and you can see I have these illustrations, and if I click on each one of them, you'll see I have a mask on each of these layers. Now, these masks basically will tell Newton where the collision will be. This is going to determine what the edge of this object is going to be when it brings it into the physics simulations. So you can use mask, but you can also use shape layers in After Effects as well. And if you've never used shape layers, they're up here where you can make custom shapes if you'd rather. Plus in After Effects CS6 you can actually bring in your vector objects from Illustrator. So to bring our scene into Newton, what we'll do is go to Composition, Newton 2, and it'll go ahead and it'll launch this window. Now you'll notice if you've used Newton 1, the UI for this has changed dramatically, and we have a couple new options as well. So first we have our body properties, and if I select any one of these, you can see I get all these different parameters I can set for this. I can change the body type, I can update the density, make it heavier or lighter, and the friction, and all sorts of different kind of effects. We also have a new tab here that shows that we can actually add collision groups, you can add magnetism, and you can also add the difference of the gravitational scale, all sorts of really cool more options to further advance your simulations. Down here you'll see we have a joints properties. You can now add joints to your different objects within Newton. So you can add things like character rigs, you can add motors and springs, so you can add some more different types of simulations using these joint parameters. Now here in my bodies parameters, this shows you that here's all the different objects I have in my layers in After Effects. So you can see I can turn things off if I want to. So for example, let's go ahead and zoom out. If I hit play on my simulation, you'll see everything just pops. And the reason why is because my background is on and it's a 2D simulation. So nothing goes behind each other. So what we need to do is turn the background off. Now with my background selected, I can go up here to body type and I can turn it to dead. Now dead means it's just deactivated. It's not going to be included in the simulation at all. So now if we hit play, you'll notice that our entire scene falls. By default, everything is set to a dynamic body type, and if I click on my floor, you'll see it's set to dynamic. Now dynamic means that all the simulations that are set up are going to be affected by this body, or to this body type. So if you have gravity turned on, it's going to be affected by this. Now we don't want the floor to be affected by gravity. We want it to be stationary, but we don't want it to be dead because we want things to collide with it. So I'm going to change my body type from dynamic to static. And what happens is now it's not going to be included within the simulation like physics and gravity, but things will still collide with it. So it's going to be almost like a non-moving object. So if I hit play, there you go, you see we have our basic simulation and everything falls because we have gravity attached to it. So now I don't want this to fall. I want this to basically, this little ball and chain to basically swing and knock these bricks over with. So what I'm going to do is go up, select my ball, and then select all my little chain objects. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply this basically distant joint. And if I click on that, you'll notice by selecting all of them, it's going to connect them all together. And if I hit play right now, you'll see that instead of them all falling individually, now they're all connected. Now obviously we don't want it to fall, and you also notice too my anchor point is where this distant joint is connected by default. So we want to change this to be up here, and we want to keep this one attached to the ceiling. So let's go ahead and go back. Now I need to do is I need to find my ball joint here, and you can see here's the joint selection. So if you have want to make any changes to your joints, you can make select them here and make any changes within these this overview window or within the joint properties as well. You can see we can change the tension and the dampening. So with my ball selected, I'm going to zoom in here and I'm going to press J on the keyboard. You'll see my cursor changes, and now I can drag this joint up to the top here. Now by default, the joints are going to connect where the anchor points are in your scene. You can either change them automatically or manually in After Effects, or you can do them within Newton itself. Now I don't want this thing to fall. I want this one chain up here to kind of keep the rest of this up here in the air. So I'm going to go ahead and select that one up here, but not the joint. I'm going to go ahead and select the actual body itself. You'll see selected. And I'm going to change that to static, just like we did for the floor, because I don't want it to move. I want it to be a stationary object. So now let's hit play. And there you go. We can see we have a little ball and chain, and you can see it hits our little objects. Now you'll also notice, and this doesn't really affect this simulation, but you'll notice that our ball object here is basically very jagged, and by default, if we select this, you'll see our mesh precision. Now this is going to basically, unless you need it high up for certain simulations, this will keep your simulations running smoothly and a little bit faster. It's going to just knock this down resolution wise, but if you need it to be a little bit higher, you can make it higher. Just make it 4, and you can see it's add a little bit more edges to here. Oops, and I accidentally moved it. And if we want, we can even make it 6, 10, and you're going to see it gets smoother and smoother. Now once again, I don't need it for this, but let's say you have a landscape and you need it to be a smooth landscape when you have something rolling down it. This is where you would go to change that. Now of course, when you increase this number, it's also going to increase your simulation time. Not a big deal, but if you just want to see a more real-time simulation and it starts to get slow, that's the reason why. So now we see that it just collides here, and I'm going to just turn the loop on. So, but it doesn't really knock these bricks over with. We want this to be a little bit heavier, or we want these to be a little bit lighter. So what we can do is actually start with the bricks, select all of them, and we can change the density to be a little bit lighter. And there you go. You see it knocks them over right away. So it looks a bit heavier. Now if I was to increase the weight of the actual ball itself, you'll notice something too. It's going to increase the constraint on the chain. So let's go ahead and just make this from 1 to 3. So it went down just a little bit more. Now let's go ahead and just do 10. You see it drags even further. So it will dip down a little bit further because it's a little bit more weight being put onto this thing. And you can make this as heavy as you want or as light as you want. I'm just going to bring it back down to 1. And so there's our simulation. So let's go ahead and export this out to After Effects. You'll notice that we have our export feature here. Now it's set to the in frame, which is set in our in comp. Now I don't need this many frames. I'm going to go ahead and just play this. I just need maybe, let's say, probably going to be 200 maybe at the most. Yeah, maybe 200 at the most. So let's just change this end frame to 200. Now I'm going to say apply to new composition. The reason why is because I like to keep a copy of my old composition in case I want to go back and make any changes. Because once Newton does this, it's going to bake keyframes into your scene. And it's nice just to have a copy just in case you need to go back and make any changes. Of course, that being said, in Newton you can actually save and load your file. So let's say I like this simulation, I can actually save this and load it again later on if I need to make changes, rather than having to start from scratch and try to remember what my settings were. Also too, when you save these settings, you'll have an auto load and save option that you can turn on. So this way, if you make any changes, it's going to automatically save them, and next time you launch your comp, it's going to automatically load it too for you. Now this is handy in case you need to go back and forth, constantly making little changes without constantly wanting to re-upload and reload settings. So this option is here for you. But let's go ahead and export this. You can also turn on motion blur for all the scenes if you want all these objects to have motion blur. So you'll see it's going to run through the simulation. And there you go. So now you'll see we have a new composition, and it's going to put like the number 2 at the end. I like to rename this. Instead of 2, I like to have it solved be the end title for this, and that just helps me know that this scene has been solved. Because let's say you have different compositions. Sometimes they have one that's 1, 2, different versions with different objects, and I really don't need the number. I just need to know that this is a solved object. So let's go ahead and launch that, and you'll see now if I go ahead and just look at these objects here, you can see I have these keyframes, and let's go ahead and just preview this real quick. And there you go. That's how you can use Newton 2 to actually add physics simulations to your After Effects comps. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and thank you for watching, and have a great day.